On today's show, Houston Rockets, real or fake? We'll take a look at things like Ime Udoka's coaching, Alperen Sengun's chances at making an all-star team this season, Jalen Green's inconsistent play, his splits road versus home, Jabari Smith Jr.'s defense, and so much more. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
Throw it up to Jalen Green.
Sengun here in the short row. Oh, Mike, that's the no-look.
Jabari for three and the win. Yeah!
Look at Tari, Eason.
Here comes Tari.
No!
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
The Houston Rockets select Thompson and Cam Whitmore.
One thing I have never done is not made the playoffs, and so we want to take that step here as well.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets. Free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day. Thank you for being an everydayer, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for making the show part of your day every single day. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, none other than the podfather himself, Rockets Wire editor and host of the Logger Line podcast, Ben DuBose. You can track down on Twitter or X at Ben DuBose. Here for a very fun game of real or fake Houston Rockets edition, where we're going to take a look at some of the things that we've learned about this Rockets team so far through not quite a quarter, way through the season, because the Rockets have played fewer games than any other NBA team so far this year due to some weird scheduling quirks because of the in-season tournament stuff and whatnot. But Ben, are you ready to dive into our game of real or fake today?
Let's do it. Unfortunately, the schedule is not fake.
There we go. Yeah, the schedule is very real, unfortunately. And that might actually be a precursor to one of our real or fake questions a little bit further down the line. But first things up, let's go with Ime Udoka's coaching so far to this point, through what we know about him, his identity, what he's done with this Rockets team through almost a quarter-way point of this season. Real or fake so far?
Definitely real. Jackson, I'll start the discussion with this. Could you imagine Steven Silas calling LeBron James a soft-ass boy?
Not a chance in hell.
I mean, come on. That's exactly what this Rockets team needs, though. And Dillon Brooks said it at Monday's practice at Toyota Center. When you're trying to revamp the culture and promote this hard-nosed edge, sure, wins and losses are a big part of it, but it's also how you play each and every game and how you approach practices. It's an overall vibe from day to day. It's a different mentality. And Ime has clearly brought that. And even with the road struggles, a lot of that is related to the aforementioned schedule. Even though they've lost 3 in a row and now they're 8-9. Look, take a step back. This is a team that was last or tied for last in the Western Conference each of the last 3 years. Now you're approaching the 20-game mark and you're still hovering around 500. That is clear progress. The defense, even though it's taken a few steps back in recent games for the season as a whole, it's still very, very good. It's hard not to like what Ime Udoka has done this season, even if the last few games haven't gone the way we wanted.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's really refreshing about Ime, too, is he really doesn't give you BS answers. He calls it how he sees it, right? He's not going to pull any punches. He will call out players for effort. Now, he doesn't like walk up to the podium and say, Jalen did this or Dillon did this or whatever, but he very specifically highlights moments throughout a game, like this most recent loss against the Lakers. He highlighted the fact that they had a lack of attention to detail and some careless turnovers. And those were very clearly like not shots taken at, but it was calling out guys like Jalen and even to a lesser degree, Fred VanVleet and Jeff Green, who had some really uncharacteristic turnovers in that loss against the Lakers. So he sets this high level of expectations for this group. And I think what you're seeing, that little interaction with LeBron, whatever you want to call it, the altercation, him sizing him up on the sideline. And it really was an embodiment of what he's done for this group, right? They're not going to back down to anybody. And I do think that Ime takes a sense of like pride in growing and nurturing this group, and he wanted to protect his guys, right? Tari, like Cam Reddish was trying to start something with Tari Eason. You saw Ime hand on Tari's shoulder, calling the Lakers out for a bunch of B words and all this, that, and the other thing. And that's what LeBron took exception to. I love that mentality. I love that the fact that he's like, no, we're a team, we're sticking together, and I'm not going to sit here and stand by while you guys try to punk our guys. That's not who I am, and that's not what we're about.
And it makes for organizational alignment, because you go back to the offseason and you see the guys they brought in, Fred VanVleet, Dillon Brooks, Jeff Green. That fits perfectly with who they are as players and as people. And so if you want this to work, a market like Houston, which is a good market, but it's not the Lakers, it's not the Warriors, you really need alignment from the top down and a strategy, because it's probably unlikely that you're ever going to be able to fully out-talent people in this puzzle they're trying to put together in terms of their path to contention a few years from now. You need to have good chemistry. You need to have everyone sort of pulling in the same direction. And so the fact that the coach reflects the types of players they brought in this offseason and the reverse, that makes it all the more likely down the line that the Rockets are ultimately able to put together a roster in the coming years that can get to that contending level we all want.
You know, one of my few gripes that I have about Ime Udoka to this point, and we'll turn it into a quickie here on the fly. Real or fake, Ime Udoka knows how to use challenges.
Ooh, fake.
It's fake, man. I don't know what it is. There are so many moments over the course of the game where, like, we know this Rockets coaching staff operates like a well-oiled machine. They've got guys real-time breaking down film and running to him and telling him, okay, this is what they're running, and then he makes adjustments on the fly. And for some reason, they can't figure out the challenge thing. They're so bad at it.
You know what's also fake? Alperen Sengun's usage of a challenge, because you see any time during a game that there's a controversial call, Alp does it every time, and sometimes he's right, but I just want to tell him, look, you have one challenge, you have to pick your spots, and some of them, coaches have gotten smarter. Like, you've got to use your challenge in like the highest leverage potential spot in terms of either flipping the game or the potential reward. If it's a situation where it's a shaky call, but maybe there's no free throws and it's not like you would have clearly gotten possession, it's just not worth it even if you do win. So I'll give Alp a fake as well, because I'm
but see, that's where I disagree with you there, Ben, because
okay.
you get the challenge back, right? So if it's a slam dunk challenge, like there have been a few of those calls, right, where we're looking at, we're like, we can see it on the replay, or you can see it on the jumbotron.
Okay, if it is 100%, I should clarify, because a lot of these are 95%. It's like, well, even the 5% that they say, it stands because we don't have enough evidence, that's often a cop out they use. For sure. But if it truly is 100%, then
And that's the weird thing, is I feel like we've seen Ime and his coaching staff be a little gun shy on pulling the trigger on a challenge, like in the first or the second quarter of a game or early on, when it's like, oh, that's a slam dunk, like you get that one, overturn the call, and you still get one back to save for the end of the game for like a crucial late game play.
And I will say, in fairness to both Ime and Alp, the Rockets have absolutely gotten the short end of the officiating stick a lot this season, especially on the road. That's what Dillon Brooks was saying at Monday's practice regarding the Ime and LeBron incident and the things that led up to that. So in fairness to them, there has been a lot of bad officiating for the Rockets to sort of navigate their challenges through.
I'm so proud of you, Ben. You know what we call that? We call that growth, because you could sit here and have a tirade about the officials, because let's be honest, they've been godforsaken horrible against the Rockets for so many of the games this season.
Let's move on. It is what it is.
All right, we'll move on. We'll keep our game of real or fake going. Coming up, we've got Alperen Sengun and his all-star campaign this season, Jalen Green's inconsistency, Jabari Smith Jr.'s defense, and a few more topics coming up here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the offers stay hot on FanDuel, because right now new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins, and all you have to do is wager $5. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. Right now, we can take a look at night 2 of the NBA in-season tournament quarterfinals action, with the New York Knicks at plus 168 to win on the road against the Milwaukee Bucks, who are minus 200 favorites in their quarterfinals matchup. And then elsewhere, on night 2 of the in-season tournament action, we've got the Phoenix Suns plus 106 to win on the road against the LA Lakers, who are minus 124 favorites. They've also got spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more that you've got to go check out. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started this NBA season. Again, that's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, official partner of the NBA. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Continuing our edition of Rockets Real or Fake. And next on our stop is Alperen Sengun, he has been absolutely spectacular this season. He's leading the team in points, he's leading the team in rebounds. His usage is up, his touches are up. Ime has
his
talked
crunch
about
time play is up.
Yeah, everything, right?
He's becoming that him we referenced a few weeks ago.
There you go. He's more or less the engine of this Rockets team. Now, he's not a solo engine, right? It's him and the two-man game with Fred VanVleet that kind of stirs the drink that is the Rockets offense. And
ideally Jalen as well, but yeah.
Exactly. But for him, our real or fake question here is his all-star campaign. Can Alperen Sengun be an all-star this season, or will he be an all-star this season? Real or fake? Go.
If we're strictly saying campaign, real. I'm still skeptical that he actually gets the honor because there are so many mainstays out there, so many veterans, and there's just not a lot of spots in the front court. Now, one way I will sort of try and hedge on this is that you do oftentimes see injury withdrawals. So I could see him being a fill-in, but to actually get in the initial 12, even though they consider it front court now and not just centers, which will help him, it's very steep when you're not a brand name, which he's not yet, and the team is not a true contender. With that said, the reason I think he'll be in the conversation, so the Rockets are 8-9 right now, but even at 8-9, the Rockets are still a story. Just the fact the Rockets are hovering around 500 is big news for one of the NBA's bigger markets that struggled mightily the last 3 years. The NBA really wants to showcase what the Rockets have done because it really reflects well on, trying to compete, not tanking, all those types of things. And so we're seeing growth from the Rockets of the team. The NBA wants to highlight that. And the big question is, will that continue over the next few weeks to the point where December, January, the Rockets are still being viewed as viable as a potential playoff team? I actually think it will, because the Rockets play 12 of their next 17 games at Toyota Center, and we know how good they are at home, 8-1. So if the Rockets are competitive, there's going to be sort of a push nationally to recognize this team. And clearly right now, their best player, the only guy that's going to get all-star consideration is Alperen Sengun. So by default if the Rockets are good enough to where nationally people want to talk about this team, there's going to be a desire to reward someone individually. Obviously, Ime as a coach can get that, but I think they're going to want to reward someone on the roster as well. Alp is that guy. So I'm going to say, if we're talking about the campaign, real.
I agree with your sentiment there. And I thought I was going to be the stick in the mud here to say fake, because I wanted to point out, right? It's less about the campaign is very real. You're seeing Alp get this push from, a lot of guys are really starting to talk about him, right? He just did the Podcast P show. He's got a lot of support from, national guys like Zach Lowe, like you mentioned. A bunch of other guys are talking about it. He's got guys like Kevin Garnett saying he'd rather see Alperen Sengun play, sit down with a game and order some takeout and, bring it back home and watch Alp play than go to James Harden's restaurant in Houston. So James Harden catching a bit of a stray there from Kevin Garnett. But basically, people are talking more about the Rockets, right? They're talking more about the Rockets, and when you talk about the Rockets, you have to talk about Alperen Sengun. So I do think the campaign is very real. The numbers are there. But then when you start to look at the number of bigs that are out there that are going to be in kind of contention for some of those front court spots, I know they've eliminated, right? It's no longer a center-only position. It's front court for the All-Star voting. But even still, you look at the number of centers who probably have a bit of a narrative advantage ahead of him this season. You're going to have the mainstays, right? Jokic, Embiid, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Rudy Gobert both have strong arguments with, as well as the Minnesota Timberwolves are playing. There's always Bam Adebayo. Then there's Domantas Sabonis. There are a lot of bigs who are probably maybe not necessarily on an individual, like in a vacuum skill level ahead of Alp, but their teams are better, or they're putting up, arguably better stat lines, whatever. It's going to be tough for Alp to make it to an All-Star game this year, although he's very clearly on track to make it happen.
He'll be in the conversation, and I will say it's arbitrary, but I do think, are the Rockets above 500 is going to be a key variable.
Yeah.
If the narrative is out there that the Rockets are a winning team, then there's going to be a bigger push to reward those guys. Whereas even if they're better than last year, if it's still a losing team, if they're still outside of the playoff / play-in mix, then it's sort of like it's a cute story, but it's not enough to propel him to, the top 12, so to speak, on one of these teams. So that's going to be the real challenge for him. It's not just about the numbers he puts up and what he does individually, but how well is it correlated with the Rockets' success as a team? Hopefully it is. Again, 12 of the next 17 at home, but very much to be determined.
All right, next on our list here of Rockets real or fake, Jalen Green's inconsistency. Do we think this is who he is as a player? I know we've talked about this before ad nauseum at this point about this year being a year where they need to give the young guys time to grow, to get acclimated to a new system, to get accustomed to trying to play winning basketball for the first time and, in their NBA careers for guys like Jalen and Alpi after their first 2 years with Steven Silas. But from what we know about him so far as a player, do we think that this is who Jalen Green is? So is it real or is it fake?
I hate being negative, but I'm going to say real, just because until he consistently does it on the road, I'm not going to buy in. It's not like this start. We talk about the team as a whole has had a rough schedule, but if you go back to the first 2 years, Jalen had these same types of splits when we talk about home versus road. And with this particular team, in fairness to Jalen, it's a lot to ask of him, because when the Rockets went this route with defense and culture, we talked about adding Fred VanVleet, Dillon Brooks, not going after a James Harden, Kyrie Irving type in the offseason, then really it sort of thrust Jalen into this role as the most dynamic perimeter creator. And that's really difficult late in games, or even if All P is your best player, sometimes it's tough to really initiate offense through your big men down the stretch, especially on the road where you're not getting as friendly of a whistle and it's more likely that opposing teams can take you out of what you want to do. So in fairness to Jalen, it's a rough position to learn, that primary creator role, which the Rockets basically made him into by default by not going after one of the big scorers in the offseason. So it is difficult for him and some of his contemporaries. The models we talked about, the Donovan Mitchell types in the past, haven't really taken a huge leap until you get into year 4, year 5. Same can be said for Devin Booker, Zach LaVine, and so on and so forth. So I guess the positive for Jalen, I'll say it doesn't have to happen this year. It can happen next year. There's still time for him, and some of it is because of the role the Rockets have put him in and the lack of alternatives. But to get back to the point, I'm going to say real, just because until he shows it to me, it's going to be tough for me to buy in fully.
I as much as it pains me, because again, so much so, and I feel like you probably share the same sentiment, Ben. I know I feel this way, and I feel like there are a lot of Rockets fans that feel this way. I want Jalen Green to work out so badly, because he's the first piece of the Rockets rebuild, right? The number 2 overall pick, the first real tangible, thing that you got from being a bad team for that entire, the awful year where they lost 20 straight games and Christian Wood and all that mess that first season. So I want him to hit so bad. I want him to be a player that can be a part of this Rockets team when they're next, competing in the play. And he doesn't have to be the best guy on the team. He doesn't even have to be the second or third best guy on the team. I just want him to be a part of the team. I want him to be a consistent part of this Houston Rockets winning basketball culture. And he's trying. He's talked about it when he's been asked about it post-game. He's still learning. He's still adjusting. And it works when he's at home. And I just don't know why there's such a stark difference between his ability to play at home versus his ability to play on the road. This is a common trend for a lot of young guys where they do struggle on the road. But I think Frank pointed this out over either on Twitter or on Rockets Chop Shop. But this is kind of an element of he's playing like a role player, right? Role players tend to thrive at home and struggle on the road. To have that star quantity, that star quality about you as a player, you have to be able to bring it at some level on the road. You can't just bring it when you're at home and then completely disappear or even be a net negative when you're on the road, which is kind of what's happening for Jalen. And that's what's been so frustrating, where it's not just it's a rough 5-10 game start of the season. We're almost a quarter of the way into the year. This is kind of who he is so far this season. Yeah.
And one thing I'll say real quickly to bring our conversation full circle, I do think Ime Udoka and the culture he's trying to set is ideal for Jalen. If anyone can kick those habits, I think Ime is the guy, because a lot of this isn't mental. It's not X's and O's. It's not tactical, or it's not physical, I should say. It's mental. And with Jalen, we've seen it time after time where on the road, you're less likely to get a friendly whistle. The crowd's going against you. And it just feels like when there's one turnover, like late in the Dallas game, it's not just the one mistake. It's that he then goes into a bit of a shell, it feels like, and it's tough for him to break out on the fly. Whereas at home, it's easier to find that positive reinforcement. So it does go into that sort of mental toughness that Ime is trying to build with this team. And so while the issue is real, because again, it's not just 1 year, we've seen the same trends the last 2 years. At the same time, if any coach can slowly sort of break him out of that, Ime Udoka, I think, is that coach.
Again, the splits for Jalen after this most recent loss for the Rockets at home, he's averaging 22 points on 58% true shooting, which is phenomenal. That's for a year 3 player. That is, those are incredible numbers. And then on the road, unfortunately, he's averaging just 15.5 points on just a hair under 50% true shooting. So the efficiency basically plummets when he's on the road at this point in time. And then, it's just been rough for Jalen. I want him to figure it out so bad. I hope he can figure it out, and I hope that, Ime is able to unlock the consistent version of Jalen Green. But as it stands right now, we're both in agreement. We're going to say the inconsistency is very real. It doesn't mean that it's permanent.
Yeah. Maybe the Rockets need to bring in Ryan Anderson as a life coach for Jalen Green. Remember Road Rhino? If anyone can bring out the road version of, or the optimal road version, Ryan Anderson is that guy.
Thank God Rhino didn't have to play on that in-season tournament court. I swear to God, there'd be concussions and CTE happening left, right, and center in the Rockets audience. Coming up, we've got our remaining real or fake questions in our final segment here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event or your next night out, right? You don't want to be stressed about how you're going to get the tickets and which app you're going to. It's a mess, right? And sometimes, let's be honest, it can be kind of a headache. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events happening near you. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive at their venue. Plus, they've got their best price guaranteed. Game Time is obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. They've got deals right up to the start of these events. You can find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals for all kinds of ticketing packages, whether it's just you and like a significant other or you and a group of friends. They've got so much. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. They've got the all-in prices, and they show you your total upfront, so you don't get like all those surprise tacked on fees at the end, which is so frustrating, right? You go through the process and then you wind up paying more in fees than you do for the actual tickets to the event. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Just create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Let's continue our game of real or fake here on today's episode. Next up, Jabari Smith Jr.'s defense. Been real or fake?
Real. I trust his ability. It's just, for me, so much of defense is not just about the tools. I mean, yes, you do need to have a certain amount of length and athleticism, but a lot of it comes down to tenacity. And for me, he has gotten better. It's not perfect. We know the weaknesses he has, especially right at the rim. But when you combine his body, his frame with the IQ, with the work ethic, it's a work in progress for sure, but I really trust his ability to do it because unlike, we're talking about Jalen Green, a lot of the issues on offense, it's a bit more complex in terms of putting it together. Defensively, a lot of it comes down to just how hard are you willing to work? How much are you willing to be diligent in your film study and everything that goes with that? And so with Jabari, it's inconsistent now. The rim protection needs to get better, but I'm going to say real simply because I think a lot of defense is effort, and I trust Jabari over the weeks, months, and years to put in that effort.
I think there's a real argument made that, especially over this last stretch of like 5 to 10 games, that he's actually been the Rockets' like second or third best defender at times when he's out there because of his switchability. And what's really, I know that there's moments where he gets kind of bullied or bodied down low, either, when he's boxing out for a rebound or trying to deal with some of the bigger bodied players that he has to deal with on switches or like, guarding guys like an Anthony Davis type or whatever right up against the rim. But what's really stood out, his ability to guard on the perimeter, right? He's moving his feet so much better this season. He's lower. He's in a defensive stance. He's talked before about his core training that he did in the offseason, doing the yoga work, all of that, being able to get lower, kind of lowering his center of gravity defensively. And I think that's why we're seeing him have success guarding guys like a James Harden or a Kawhi Leonard or a LeBron James out there on the perimeter. Because to me, I was never worried about, he's got the body to like fill out, like give him 2 or 3 more years in an NBA strength and conditioning program, and he's not going to get bullied down low like that. I'm not worried about that. And then there are moments where it is maybe a bit of an effort thing. Like you got to do the dirty work early on, be in your spot early to box out, to get a good, get good leverage on a post up.
He's
or whatever,
still a little
like
slow on rotation sometimes. But again, the big thing for me with Jabari is just the week on week growth.
Yeah.
That typically speaks to how diligent a guy is in his preparation, his coachability. And those are the types of things, especially on the defensive side of the ball, that make me pretty bullish that long-term he's going to be very good.
All right. Next one. Dillon Brooks's unselfish play. This is a tricky one. Real or fake?
I'm going to say, this is tough.
You want me to go first on this one?
No, I'll go first. I'll take the lumps. I'm going to say fake.
Okay.
Not that I'm expecting him to go full-blown Memphis Dillon Brooks, but he's the guy I worry most about that.
Like a regression to the mean, kind of, right?
Well, yeah. And when the vibes aren't good, the Rockets got off to this amazing start. We know they lost the first 2 games, or first 3 games, but then 6-3, the vibes have been good. It's very easy for him to buy in on this new model of keeping the shot attempts down, trusting the system. He strikes me as the type of guy that when you go through the challenges that you're ultimately going to go through over 82 games, has a high likelihood of, I don't want to say go back to exactly who he was in Memphis, but perhaps there's still some of those bad habits that may take a little bit longer to fully
kind of like
out.
the Thanos meme, like grab the glove, fine, I'll do it myself, right? Like that. Like we saw that a little bit during some of the Rockets like offensive struggles or their droughts where Dillon starts trying to force things offensively, and you're like, these are the bad shot attempts. This is the Dillon Brooks where he's trying to take over a game, and that's not who he is, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I guess the best way I would put it with Dillon, it's not as simple as turning a light switch on or off. There's a progression. There's some of these habits that, they are legitimate criticisms that people around the NBA made when the Rockets signed him. Is he going to be willing to take less shots on a worse team? Because, we know how he ideally should be used, but it comes down a lot of it to just his willingness to embrace that. I think he has thus far, because really until the last week, the vibes have been very good, and he's been sort of acclimating to a new system, so it's easier for him to make some of those sacrifices. What I do wonder is what happens when the team goes through a funk. Is he going to put it on himself to say, hey, I've got to go out there and get this bucket to take this young team and sort of get them over the hump? Not saying he's going to fully regress to Memphis Dillon. I do think there's some progress that's been made, but I just don't think it's as simple as sort of flipping a light switch. I think it's still going to be sort of a demon he has to fight a little bit, and there may be some times that he loses that battle.
I agree with your sentiment there. I think we've been pretty much been more or less on the same page, across the board here. A little boring, but I'm also not going to change my opinion just for the sake of, creating a controversy here on the show, Ben. We don't do that here at Locked On Rockets. All right, our next guy on this list, Steady Freddie, the point guard, the point general for this Houston Rockets team, his playmaking ability. Because this was a thing that a lot of Rockets fans, a lot of Raptors fans tried to warn against Fred VanVleet, saying, he's selfish, he's a shot chucker, he won't get guys involved, he'll throw other guys under the bus, he doesn't share the basketball, all these different things. Meanwhile, about a quarter of the way into the season, 16 games, Fred VanVleet is the 4th leading player in assists per game this NBA season. He is averaging, where's his assist per game? Oh my God, I lost it.
9.1.
9.1. Thank you for having that off the top of your head. 9.1.
Yeah, I did a Fred story earlier.
Okay, there we go. Fantastic, right? Great minds think alike. So he's top 5 in assists per game, and his turnover rate is exceptional. His assist to turnover rate, I should say, is incredible, right? He takes great care of the basketball. Real or fake on Fred's playmaking?
Yeah, I'm real. I think, unlike Dillon, I think when you look at Fred's body of work, and I know there's Raptors fans that might push back a little bit, but I think when you look at the data, when you listen to his interviews, he had a great podcast today with Adrian Wojnarowski, the Woj Pod at ESPN. He just seems so comfortable in his own skin. He's also aware of his limitations. Whereas with Dillon, even though he's not a great, half-court creator, so to speak, he does have the body to get some separation and fire a step-back three. We've seen it at times this year. Whereas Fred knows he's going to be undersized most nights. He seems to be well aware of what his limitations are. And I would just say, above all else, Fred seems to have a really good head on his shoulders. He seems to be aware of his strengths and his weaknesses. And the Rockets, say what you will, unless things go way off the rails, and at that point, it won't be just Dillon. It'll be any veteran player that's trying to sort of rescue them. As long as there's some progress, and there has been thus far, and I think Fred's going to stick with the blueprint that's gotten them to this point, because clearly there has been growth. They have taken a step forward, and why mess up what's working?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more on the Fred front. The playmaking, having a floor general out there to kind of set the table. And I do think one of the key differences between Fred's play this year with the Rockets versus last year with the Raptors is I think the Rockets have been able to clearly identify, hey, we've got Alperen Sengun, right? And there's a great two-man game between Alp and Fred that just never felt like it kind of coalesced between Fred and Scotty Barnes, unfortunately, which you would think that two-man game would have a lot of success as well. But Alp just being a bit more of an offensive weapon, somebody that you really want to, that can be a go-to weapon offensively, whereas Scotty, maybe a bit more of that ancillary type player, although he's taken a significant leap this year. So maybe it was just a year too soon for Scotty Barnes, but we're enjoying the two-man game between Fred and Alp. So
one quick addendum I want to throw on there. I will say fake if you're asking, will he stay at 9.1 assists? I think that's slightly aggressive simply because as the year progresses, I think you hope that Alperen Sengun and Jalen Green will take leaps forward in their development. And so there'll be some more on-ball creation reps that come with that.
Okay.
I think the Rockets are hopeful that Ime Thompson can do some things once he gets back from the ankle injury. So simply because of development within your young core, I do think the assists per game will go down a little bit, but I don't think that it will be because of a decline in his playmaking. It'll just be because the Rockets gradually give a few more reps to the younger guys if they develop.
No, that is actually a fantastic point. And when you look at all the top assist getters, at least in the top 10, Fred is leading the way in minutes per game by a substantial margin. He's averaging about 2 more minutes per night than any of the other guys in the top 10 of the assist leaders.
Yeah, Ime's doing what Nick Nurse did in Toronto.
There you go. Hey, look, sometimes,
but I think he knows it needs to change.
Yeah. So and look, when Ime Thompson returns, that'll be somebody who cuts into some of Fred's minutes. And I think that has to have been a conversation that those two have had where it's just like, hey, Ime is out. I know you need playmaking. Play me more minutes early here in the season while I'm still fresh, and then I'll get my rest and recovery later in the season when we have all of our available pieces, and maybe we can run Cam Whitmore a little bit more, Ime Thompson a little bit more, guys like that to kind of give me a breather, rest me on some back-to-backs, that kind of thing down the line. All right, we've got a couple more here to round this one out. Let's go with Cam Whitmore carving out a rotation spot this season. Real or fake? It's very early on. Do we think he can carve out a rotation spot this season? Real or fake?
I'm going to say fake, but before anybody hates me, I'm going to say fake because I'm an optimist.
Okay.
And I think if the Rockets both stay healthy and competitive, i.e. if they're hovering around 500 and it's getting late in the year, it's going to be very tough to dramatically change the rotation from what's working. And I do think there's big benefits if this team can actually make a play-in push and play relevant basketball into March and April. There are huge developments up and down the roster that even if you have to take the L of Cam Whitmore year one, not getting consistent rotation run, then it's worth it because of the big picture. And of course, you can give him a rotation role next year in year two. There's plenty of players that didn't play much as rookies, and it hasn't set them back in the grand scheme. So I'm saying fake because I think the Rockets stay competitive. What I will say is if the Rockets fall off the beaten path, and if by March 1st, they're 5-6 games out of the play-in mix and it's becoming increasingly unrealistic, then in that scenario, I do think that you're more likely to see, a shift towards even more reps for rookies or young guys you're trying to develop. And so because of that, I think that's the scenario. And also injuries, but let's be optimistic. I don't want to assume a bad injury to a core piece, but assuming health, then I think the key variable is going to be what the Rockets are doing as a team. And if the Rockets continue to be competitive, which I think they can be, then it's going to be tough for Cam to crack the rotation.
I agree with you there. Again, we're two peas in the same pod here. It's just you look at how Aaron Holiday has come on strong this season. You've got the eventual return of Ime Thompson. Fred and Jalen they're not going anywhere. They're going to be mainstays. So it's just hard to find a spot somewhere in the rotation for Cam where he would be able to get those minutes without squeezing too many minutes from somebody else. I also, to your point about pending health. Also pending any eventual trade, right? If the Rockets make a deal somewhere in the midseason, maybe
consolidation move.
Yeah, maybe they feel strongly about Cam, being the guy who absorbs kind of the Aaron Holiday minutes, if you will, right? The short, 10 to 12 minutes a night, kind of that ninth or 10th man off the bench. So that's a possibility, but I wouldn't bank on it completely at this point, which is frustrating because I do think Cam has a lot that he can offer to this team, but it doesn't really feel like they're at a place where they need to throw Cam out there because they're just desperate. They're trying to work with what they've got right now. They're trying to work through Jalen Green right now, which actually this kind of dovetails perfectly into our final, second to last, real or fake here. Starting lineup stays the same all season. Real or fake?
fake simply because there's going to be injuries. But
no. But
okay.
The same logic you used before. Everybody's healthy, no injuries, no missed time. Starting lineup stays the same, real or fake?
Real. I don't know who would come out.
You don't think there's a chance that one of like Jalen or Jabari might get sat at some point this season?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I just don't know. I just don't know who. I mean, Jabari. I mean, my God, it's not just the defensive strides. You look at his season-long numbers now. He's shooting about 50% from the field, 36% on threes. His true shooting percentage is 60. I mean,
Jabari's
he's played so well.
He's been awesome.
Yeah,
like,
it's not even a conversation in my mind anymore. Jalen, his inconsistencies are real, but who's the alternative? I don't think one of the rookies is going to be that ready in year one, and there's no Kevin Porter Jr. anymore. So there's just not really a hedge at this point. I mean, I guess theoretically you could make a big trade at the deadline, but I don't know who that would be. It feels like to me a huge mega trade probably isn't likely in the next offseason.
You could go all wings and start Tari Eason. You basically slot Dillon Brooks at the
but
2,
then your spacing
throw Tari
gets really
but
then your spacing gets really clunky. I think the Rockets give Jalen this year to sink or swim, and even if it's bad, whatever, you figure that out in the offseason. I'm going to say real.
All right, real there. I'm inclined to agree with you. Last one, the in-season tournament, good for the NBA, real or fake?
Good. So real.
Real? Okay.
Yeah. It give fans a reason to care. I mean, everybody knows my rants on Twitter, but I hate this. I don't know, just sort of hate watching culture where fans look, they watch basically for reasons to tear down players and teams they don't like. So give fans in other markets, like this, the Group B in the West that the Rockets were in is a perfect example of this. It's really a microcosm of what the NBA is trying to do. Denver, the Clippers, Dallas, these are teams with multiple superstars. For the season as a whole, they are better teams than the Pelicans and the Rockets. Or I think they are. Now, maybe the Pelicans, if Zion continues to stay healthy and plays at a phenomenal level, maybe there's something there, but, I'll believe it when I see it with Zion. The point is, expectation-wise, Pelicans and Rockets were at the bottom of that group, and yet the Rockets had a chance to win up until the finale in Dallas, and the Pelicans actually did win. It's good to give those fans a reason to care. The Nuggets, the Clippers, the Mavs, teams with multiple superstars, they're going to have reasons to care. The Nuggets just won the NBA championship, and they're one of the front runners to win it again. So I love just giving more fans a reason to stay connected with NBA basketball. So real for me.
I agree with it there. I was fully bought in once I started seeing the courts and everything. I got excited by it, and now I'm really excited to see how the in-season tournament plays out.
I will disagree there. The courts are fake. Those drive me crazy.
Look, so you know what? Some of the
Get
courts
off my
fake.
lawn.
Some of the courts look good. Some of them not so good. And unfortunately, the Rockets,
red,
blood red court is it is not it. Give me the Dunkstronaut or give me death, because the Dunkstronaut court is incredible. That is a very real court, so we need that one 100% of the time.
And Dallas Mavs, what the hell? That is the most obvious. That's the most obvious BS I've ever seen. With they were missing some parts, or they had a logistics delay, whatever they called it in the shipping. No, you just didn't want to do it. And you found a creative excuse. Come on.
Such a mess. All right, Ben, you know the drill.
Rockets should have gotten the win for free based on Dallas not having the court.
Another real statement on his way out the door. Ben, let everybody know where they can track you down at.
Yep. Ben DuBose on Twitter /X, the Logger Line on the same, and the Rockets Wire, and also rocketswire.usatoday.com for all your daily Houston Rockets news coverage.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast, or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe. I'm going to drop the template in the YouTube comments for real or fake and all the topics that we tackled. I want your thoughts on our real or fake topics. Give us your thoughts in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.